What up, dude bros? I'm Frank. This is a video review of the Nerf Rival Artemis. This blaster's spring-powered pump action, primed like that, and it holds 30 rounds in the integrated magazines. Interesting and much anticipated addition to the Rival line. Let's get into the review. Included is the blaster itself, a few Rival balls, and the instructions. Starting, of course, with the externals and the basic function. This is a Rival blaster, so it shoots the Rival rounds. It's not compatible with Nerf darts, it's just the balls. Balls. But to the externals, this handle right here is how you prime the blaster. It's a spring-powered blaster again, so you prime back, and then you push forward, and now you're ready to fire one time, if it were loaded and stuff. Up front is a really cool rotating barrel thing. Every time you fire it, it's moving. Like that, although it's not just for the lels or just for the looks or style points or tactics or whatever, it's actually functional. It's how it's loading out of all of the magazines. Up top is a Nerf Rival rail. Of course, this is not the same as the normal tactical in-strike rail. It's a Rival rail, which is why I said, you know, Rival rail. That redundancy is redundant and it happens to repeat itself. I'm bad at jokes, I don't know why I try. The clear tubes in the rear here are the magazines, and these are not removable box mags like a lot of other magazines. These are integrated into the blaster permanently. Well, nothing's really permanent with the proper application of explosives or an axe, but you know, for most people, this is not going to be removed. And this system contrasts with something like the Apollo, where it has, like what I'm talking about, an external box mag, or, well, it's not really a box, it's a cylinder, but you can take it out and then put in a fresh one that's already loaded. This blaster, the Artemis, does not have that capability. Anyways, to load up the magazines, you slide this guy back, like that. Moving this back is doing two things. First, it's compressing the spring so you can very easily drop in your balls, and it's also exposing the little opening in the magazine so you can actually load. There are three separate loading holes because these are three sort of independent magazines. The loading mechanism in the front grabs from all of the magazines, but you load in them independently. So in this first one here, after you slide this back, you can just push in the balls like this. And sliding this thing back compresses the spring, so when you're loading in the balls, it's not under spring compression. And I like what they've done here with the loading tube. It's kind of sort of a one-way entrance, so I can put in the balls, but then if I like tip the blaster over, I'm not gonna spill them all. How disheartening would it be if you load up two magazines, which is 20 rounds, you're loading your third, then you know, you tip the blaster and everything spills. Talk about dropping the ball. Oh man, oh man. I should be a comedian for a living. Or I'll leave that to people who are funny. Little note, that does make it difficult to unload the blaster if you don't want to shoot out all of the ammo. If you load it up to capacity and you can't shoot for whatever reason, it's rather tricky to pull the balls out. Compared to the Apollo mag, which you just push this button and it unloads itself. That was suggestive. Each magazine tube holds 10 rounds, so the total capacity of the Artemis is 30 rounds, which is pretty high capacity, especially given its size. It's not really a bulky blaster, and it's nice that they have inline magazines like the Zeus, but you know, 3 of them instead of just 1. More on the loading and how all of that works after I cover the rest of the externals. Pretty basic stuff here for the Rival line. Moving back, it's an oversized grip, so that's very comfortable for an adult, but it's not alienating to a kid, so that's a great grip. I whine about this stuff all the time. Good example of, you know, a comfortable grip for everyone. No comments on the trigger pull. It feels like a spring trigger should. The little button next to the trigger is a mechanical safety. They call it a lock, but it's like a safety. And of course, the safety just allows you to disable the ability to fire if you know, don't want to shoot on accident. They have these in the other Rival blasters, so it's just kind of in line with the Rival theme, which I think is a nice little touch. And on the left side of the blaster, there's a priming indicator. Priming indicator, as the name suggests, indicates when you're primed. Self-explanatory titles. It all makes sense, doesn't it? So when you prime back the blaster, the indicator changes, so you just learn what it looks like so you can tell whether or not you've primed the blaster. With the locks in the blaster, after you prime it, you're not able to prime it again, so the priming indicator is not really completely essential. Helpful if you don't want to have to tug back on your priming grip, but it's not a chamber indicator to tell you if you're about to actually fire one. If you're out of ammo and you prime back the blaster, this indicates the same way. So it just says, I've primed it back. It doesn't say if you're actually ready to fire. But it could be useful in some situations, and it works as expected. And in the all the way back, sling mounts. Thank you, Hasbro. I whined about this in the other Rival blasters, and I'm so glad that you've included them with the Artemis, because for people that aren't using slings, it means almost nothing. It doesn't look bad, it doesn't get in the way, but for people who want to run a sling, we can actually run a sling. Because the Apollo, it's like, oh, okay, I want to run this as a secondary, just like throw it on my hip in between games because I don't want to carry it around. So do you put a big carabiner in your trigger guard and accidentally have a negligent discharge? Well, that's what the safety's for, but still. It can happen, whatever. So this allows you to very comfortably sling this blaster. And this top sling point here happens to be in perfect balance for a 1-point sling, and then you could also use a 2-point sling if you prefer that. So it won't be all crooked or whatever. So that's cool. Those are the externals. I'll show you it fire and then try to explain how it's firing just in case you can't tell by the video. Lego. They slam fire by holding down the trigger. Yeah, so it's a blast to shoot. 30 rounds, you know, slam fire, spring blaster. The Chaos is a lovely blaster, and I love that, and it's still probably my favorite rival blaster, but this one's really fun, and springers have their place, even though I'm all about the hashtag flywheel master race. Verbalized hashtag, because I'm a boss, or a dork. Same thing. Easy to use. There are locks, like I mentioned, that prevent you from double priming, which sometimes when you're trying to run it really fast, especially with slamfire, can slow you down, and this is just a reoccurring problem with the Nerf locks. When they put them in there to make sure you don't accidentally break something, when you're trying to go really fast, the locks don't move out of the way fast enough so you can feel them. It's not that big an issue with the Artemis. So that's not a complaint, just a note that the friction can be felt, and I did have 1 or 2 misfires, which was kind of weird. It could have been user error, like I short-stroked it or something, but through one of the magazines, it did not load properly for 1 shot, and then like 2 or 3 shots later, it shot 2. So I think one of the balls just got kind of trapped in this rotating like Ferris wheel thing. Only happened 1 or 2 times, and I think I've shot a few hundred rounds through it. I've only had this for about a day. And it only occurred when I was running slam fire and trying to, you know, shoot pretty quickly, which is when most jams or, you know, malfunctions occur. But it's not a huge issue, just worth noting. I put the Artemis up on my chronograph and I got an average of about 89 feet per second, which is a little bit below the rival par. I can't really call it a par or an average fairly because they're kind of scattered. There aren't that many rival blasters really to generate a fair average. Need more data, bro. Hasbro, bang out some more rival blasters. You know, for the sole reason of giving me a par or average for the line, not because they're awesome. But the chrono readings of the Artemis are similar to the Zeus. The Apollo and the Chaos are still going to shoot a little bit hotter and faster further than the Artemis. Now, just a few more details on the loading mechanism, because when I looked at the pictures, I was just kind of thinking, how is that going to feed? Like, is everything moving into one little loading port? But no, they made this really cool Ferris wheel thing. I think it's overcomplicated, but it's super cool. Overcomplicated meaning I think there are easier ways to do what they're trying to do, but I'm not even gonna like whine about it because it's really cool looking. And it's not like that Alien Menace Ravager, which just like spins the barrel for no reason other than the lels. This is actually like loading the blaster from multiple magazines, which I think is cool. So when you prime it, the barrels rotate like a Ferris wheel and pick up passengers or balls from the magazines. If all of the mags are loaded to capacity, it will feed out of the right one completely and deplete all of this magazine and then move to the center and then move to the left. But if you only have time to load one magazine and you just load the left, it's not gonna dry fire 20 times. It'll just load from the left. But the first few rounds loaded into the Ferris wheel come from all 3 magazines. So if you load like 6 rounds into the right magazine, it'll dry fire a few times before you're able to fire, you know, all 6 rounds in a row. Whereas if you had the same 6 rounds and you put 2 into each magazine, you'd be able to fire 6 consecutive rounds without dry firing twice, you know, in the beginning. It's a fascinating mechanism. I don't have the words to precisely describe how it works. Hopefully that's helpful along with the video. It's just fun to watch, really. So that's the overview and the firing and all the objective stuff out of the way. Now to my opinion on the Artemis, if you care. Overall, my opinion on the Artemis is actually positive. When I saw it, I have to admit, I had a negative bias towards it. I assumed I would not like it because of the bizarre magazines. Initially, I was kind of complaining, why would you use integrated magazines? I'd prefer like detachable ones because I personally like to have a bunch of preloaded mags on my body so I can very quickly reload, and it's more convenient for a game, not necessarily, you know, a super long game where you're reloading your mags. This would actually be more convenient there, or a super short game when you might not even deplete all your mags. Magazine theory is a debate in itself with no right answer. Everybody just prefers different stuff, so I'll leave my opinion on that element of the blaster right there. But the overall ergonomics of the Artemis are comfortable. I like how small it is, especially, I mean, this small of a blaster with rival consistency and range with a capacity of 30 rounds, that's impressive to me. The Chaos has 40 rounds with full auto, but it's much bigger, much heavier with the 6D batteries. And that magazine is wicked big. The integrated inline magazines make it really compact for the capacity. But I want to acknowledge the con that this comes with. You can't switch out mags very quickly, and hand loading the balls into these little magazines is a bit tricky, and it'd be really tricky to do it while you're running, and especially running getting shot at. Like, it takes a little bit of precision and like hand-eye coordination. You're watching shoving it into a very small hole. Minor con with this system, it's difficult to unload, although if they did not design it like that, I would be even more annoyed that you could drop your balls all over the place when you're trying to reload. So definitely worth it in my opinion. I like that it's pretty much a one-way, but I actually tried to unload the blaster because I didn't want to make noise and unload like by shooting. And it was really tricky because you're kind of trying to get the balls out. So I was like, yep, okay, I'm just going to wake somebody up and slam fire 30 rounds in a row because I need it to be empty for a photo. Totally worth it though. So, smooth operation, high capacity, it's spring for those that don't want to rev up or deal with batteries, and it's much lighter weight than the Zeus and the Chaos, which doesn't come across in videos very well, but because it's Springer, it doesn't have to have those stupid, big, heavy batteries. Oh dear, I feel like I'm being converted to a Springer peasant. Never. Never. Oh, and another minor gripe I have with rival blasters in general, I really wish there was a stock attachment point. It would not hurt the function of the blaster at all, but it's weird, like for me, to hold a blaster like this. It's easier to prime, and it's just easier and more comfortable for me to shoot if it's just up against my shoulder. And I get that this complaint is not really fair because the rival blasters are separating themselves from the in-strike stuff, and they are not compatible with the tactical attachments. So I get it, but I want a stock. There, complaint out of the way. Yeah, and if I'm griping about little stuff like that, obviously the blaster works pretty well. I didn't have any jams or malfunctions other than what I mentioned with the dry fire, and then it double fired a few later, but that didn't happen very often, and I ran it pretty hard in my testing procedure. So overall, pretty positive opinion. I don't like the red at all. I think red and orange clash, and I wish I had a blue one, but the one on eBay that I found, this one was red. Lay bummer. I bought this blaster on eBay because it's not available locally yet. They are leaking in various parts of the world right now, but I don't think their release date has actually passed, but I'll put links in the description box below when I get them or when it's available. So yeah, that's the Artemis. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay tactical.